We're joined on the line from the count at Blackpool South by Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK. Richard, very good morning to you. Now, I've been watching on my TV screen here an interview you're doing. You look quite chirpy. What do you think is going to happen in Blackpool South? I mean, you're not. Are you going to predict a Reform win?
Good morning, Iain. I think everybody knows that this is going to be a Labour victory. That's no surprise to anybody, has been the case really for many weeks. But the question is who comes second, and I can confirm that it is nip and tuck. It is too close to call for second place between Reform UK and the Conservatives. Being an optimist in politics, I'm obviously hoping that we're just going to take it. From our perspective, this is by some considerable margin going to be our best by-election result. We're going to significantly outperform our national polling average. And yeah, that's the trend. I think there'll probably be a result in about 20 to 30, 35 minutes is the expectation here. But what this is showing, Iain, frankly, is that in the north and indeed in the Midlands, we've had some very good council elections in the northeast, in Sunderland. We're rapidly becoming the opposition to Labour in the north of England and elsewhere, and I think even in Wales.
There's a poll out, I think, either today or yesterday, putting you on 15% and the Conservatives on 18%. What went through your head when you saw that poll result? Because I can't imagine, if I'd said that to you a year ago, I think if you were being honest, you'd have thought, well, there's no way we're going to do that well.
Well, as I said, Iain, you have to be an optimist in politics, but we've made huge progress in recent months. And what went through my head was joy, actually, and delight. That's the closest gap at 3% of any poll. It's a YouGov poll, and obviously there's a range of polls. We all know that, so let's wait and see. But the real poll is, of course, on election day, election nights as the results are counted. And so far for Reform UK, we're delighted by the progress we're making. We know that first past the post is difficult, but we deal with the electoral system we've got. But whilst it's tough on the way up, it's also brutal on the way down for the Conservatives.
Why have you only stood in 1 in 6 council seats throughout the country? Is it because, I mean, I understand it is difficult for any party to fill every slot because you have to find the candidates, but has this been intentional, or would you have preferred to have fought all of them?
We're delighted that those 260 odd candidates that have stood, but our focus is always, we've said, on making sure that we can stand in every seat in England, Scotland, Wales, about 630 seats. So yes, that's been our focus as a small growing party. There's only limited resources. There's no secret in that. And so that's been our key focus. But also we've got some great mayoral candidates, and the mayoral results are going to be very, very interesting again, particularly in the north of England. We've got a big eye on the northeast, on Greater Manchester, East Midlands. So there's a lot to go for. And we're also very excited by what may be the possibilities in the Greater London Assembly elections, where we're optimistic that we're going to get some members elected there in the GLA.
We have Joe Twyman with us, a renowned pollster. He's got a question for you, Joe.
Referring to Sunderland, which you mentioned, Richard, Reform UK's performance is obviously up significantly there, but you're still a long way behind the equivalent shares that UKIP achieved in 2015 and 2016 in the same wards. Do you think that Reform UK would benefit from having an issue like Brexit under a banner under which people could unite? And obviously you have immigration, but it doesn't appear to be appealing in the same way that Brexit was.
Well, it's interesting, Joe, but of course UKIP had been going for 20 years then, and it takes time to build a brand. There's still, there's still probably a third of the country who probably only think of politics for a couple of minutes a week. I know that sounds strange to political aficionados, but that's the reality. So, look, given where we are, the progress we're making, how new this brand name is of Reform UK, frankly, we're delighted with those results. We beat the Tories in 16 of 25 wards in Sunderland, which is a Labour stronghold. And we came very close in one ward to catching up with Labour. So, really strong progress, and we're delighted with that. We've got other results. It'll be interesting to see what happens in Barnsley and elsewhere as those results come in.
Let's assume that you do well tonight all over the country. Your opinion poll ratings continue to gradually climb. Is that not the time for Nigel Farage to come back into proper politics rather than playing as a broadcaster? And if he decided to do that, does that mean you automatically have to stand aside as leader of Reform UK?
Hey, look, I've always said that the more help that Nigel can give, the better. and he's got a big decision to make. Does he want to get stuck into full-time politics again? He thought he'd finished with that. Does he want to stand again? And so these are, big life-changing decisions for Nigel. Clearly, the election is coming at a fair pace. It may well, for all we know, be a summer election. So I think you can assume that we'll be, Nigel will make that decision soon. And the more help he can give, frankly, the better. I've always said that, it's a massive job trying to grow a small party. We're making great progress, but the more help, the better in.
Doesn't he have to make that decision, though, within the next few weeks? Because the election is, I think probably going to be November, but it could be earlier than that. Surely he needs to sort of put up or shut up.
I think that obviously the clock is ticking, to be candid, and we're very much preparing for a summer election. I think people are underplaying the potential for that, and any party, ourselves included, we can't be caught unprepared, so that we're very much preparing for an election as early as the 27th of June or the 4th of July.
Does it not concern you that the more votes that you take away from the Conservatives, the bigger the size of the Labour majority?
Look, there's no difference between the two main parties. They're two variants of socialism: high taxes, high government spending, mass immigration, unnecessary huge regulation, pro-net zero. You can't tell the difference between the two. The reality is we've got no growth. We've got the longest recession per person, and that's what actually matters to individuals and households. The longest recession per person for 70 years. It's some 2 years long now and continuing. As I say, there's no growth anywhere. We've got to reform the way that our economy is run. We've got to reform the way our healthcare is run. We're the only party in with an ambition to get to zero waiting lists in 2 years. And democracy is much better when there are more alternatives, more choices, more debate about some of the difficulties, issues and the challenges the country faces.
Richard Tice, thank you very much for joining us here on LBC. That's Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK. He's live at the count in Blackpool South. We hope to get the result. Well, he was predicting sometime in the next half an hour. Henry Hill, you heard that. He said Joe Stevens issued a hollow laugh when he said that the two main parties were almost identical. He's got a certain appeal, hasn't he? And his party have got a certain appeal to, I would say, more traditionally minded Conservative supporters.
Yeah, I think one of the problems Reform has is that actually there's a misalignment between their policy offer and the big gap, I think, on the right, which is voters that the Conservatives won in 2019. Now, Boris Johnson delivered that big result by offering voters a quite different model of conservatism, one that was, well, there was Brexit, obviously, but also more focus on public spending. And I think that kind of left on economics but right on law and order and culture is the big gap in the market on the right for a political party. And yet Reform UK is, partly I think because of its makeup and who's founded it, pitching very much on the kind of like Thatcherite model. And I don't think that you would have caught Nigel Farage, if he were in that interview, in that position, denouncing both parties as socialists or whatever. I think that that's just a slightly misjudged attack. The Reform are capitalising on the fact that there is a lot of disaffection with the Conservatives, because no matter what section of the Conservative Party you're from, there's lots to be disappointed about this past few period in office, right? But I think they're going to do a lot less well than they perhaps could, because they haven't actually calibrated their offer to where the gap is.